Yo, you're watching the Screaming Fish here, people, and once again, I'm here for yet another video, but this time, we ain't talking about movies, we ain't talking top 10s, and we certainly ain't going into video games. We are looking at something different. In fact, we're looking at a little project I've been working on for a little while, but yeah, we're basically looking at how Shakespeare pretty much impacted on our culture, basically. And I can understand how, if you're a regular viewer of my YouTube channel, this would be kind of different because you're probably more used to my movie reviews, occasional video game reviews, and occasional top 10s. But, well, this is different, so, oh well. So, without further ado, prepare to be dazzled, prepare to be amazed, prepare to cringe at how much information I managed to conjure up about Shakespeare and how I almost died of information overload. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So, Shakespeare is the most widely known and loved poet / playwright across the world. The fact that his plays are still performed, studied, and read is the mark of his genius, pretty much. His impact endures not only in the way we all express ourselves, but how we experience and process the world around us. Shakespeare was a very creative writer. He invented loads of new words that we still use today. He is also the most quoted writer of all time, as well as the most translated writer of all time. So, how does Shakespeare actually impact on our culture? One of the biggest impacts Shakespeare had that still happens today is on our language and vocabulary. Even if you have never seen a Shakespeare play, you will have used one of his words or phrases probably without even knowing. Of the 17,000 words in his plays, about 10% of those words were entirely new words that were invented by Shakespeare himself. For example, eyeball and puking were both invented by Shakespeare. He invented many phrases that we all still use today, such as in the mind's eye, which means seeing something in your imagination, and dead as a doornail, which means, well, very dead, and wild goose chase, or in a pickle. He enriched the English language in a huge way, and without him, our vocabulary would be very different. So, Shakespeare's plots and characters and language continue to inspire ceaseless adaptations and spin-offs. He inspires artists of all genres to create films, books, ballets, operas, music, and even paintings. Shakespeare appeals to different generations, of course. His work is timeless and can be presented in a traditional way or even translated into a modern-day setting. So, time to do what I do best, which is talking about movies. Yay! So, the perfect example of adapting a Shakespeare play into a modern-day setting, in my personal opinion, is Romeo plus Juliet, which is directed by Baz Luhrmann and stars Leonardo DiCaprio and Claire Danes as the titled characters. This adaptation of what is Shakespeare's most iconic story, next to Hamlet, is a retelling of the classic story Romeo and Juliet. Well, obviously. And only difference being is that it's set in modern day with guns for swords. However, despite the film's modern-day setting, the plot is still largely the same, and the film's every line of dialogue is delivered in authentic Shakespearean language, as well as every line of dialogue being ripped straight from the pages of the original play. Just a few lines switched around here and there, if you know what I mean. So, as for my own thoughts on the movie, I really enjoyed the movie. The performances, in particular Leonardo DiCaprio, are great. Everyone acts really over the top, but in a good way. The decision to use authentic Shakespearean language is both a gutsy and brilliant decision, in my opinion, as it adds to the over-the-top aspect of the movie and makes the movie feel more Shakespearean. Not to mention, this is a beat-for-beat retelling of the original story, which works surprisingly well in a modern-day setting. There are also a lot of strong character moments that really make you care for the characters, and the film is shot really well, as there are a lot of breathtaking shots in this movie, and others that will mesmerize you to the point where you just cannot look away. And that's not forgetting the action sequences in this. Admittedly, there is not a huge emphasis on action, as this film is a tragedy and a romance at the same time, but the few action sequences in this movie are amazing, really fun and over the top. The way I would describe this movie after watching it is pretty much the best way to trick a guy into going to see a romance. You make him think it's an action movie, when actually it's romance, and better yet, a Shakespeare story. So, moving on, Another movie based on Shakespeare, believe it or not, is The Lion King. Now, I know what you're thinking. How could a movie about talking cats be based off a Shakespeare play, of all things? But yes, it is indeed based off a Shakespeare play, and that play is, of course, Hamlet. The story closely parallels the tragedy and is a story of jealousy, responsibility, and revenge. We have Scar, the jealous uncle, like Claudius from Hamlet. We have Simba, who is Scar's nephew and heir to the throne, like Hamlet, in Hamlet. We also have Mufasa, the king, who is murdered by his brother, like Hamlet Sr., in Hamlet. In the scene straight after the opening of the film, which is amazing by the way, we see Scar lamenting about Simba's birth and his brother being king. He is jealous, angry, and defiant. He challenges Mufasa, and pretty much the whole film continues along the lines of Hamlet, with Mufasa being murdered and Simba being very slow to avenge his death. Although Hamlet dies and Simba lives, they both resume their rightful place and rescue their kingdoms from evil. So, moving on to advertising. In today's world of modern advertising, Shakespeare is one of the most recognizable and most powerful brands in the world. Thousands of tourists go to Shakespeare's Global Theatre every year. The RSC, Royal Shakespeare Company, that's what RSC stands for, of course, continually produces plays using world-class famous actors, and the tickets sell out in literally minutes. His language and his characters are used repeatedly to sell everything from chocolate and beer and even fish. Dudley did not just say fish because my YouTube name is Screaming Fish Productions. Not to mention Valentine's Day cards that reference his sonnets that are pretty much printed every year. One of the funniest ads, I might add, I have ever seen that was made by Birdseye was made for TV in 1979. It featured June Whitfield as Anne Hathaway, Shakespeare's wife, of course, and Terry Thomas as the man himself, Shakespeare, and it is a comical play on Shakespeare's words and very good advertising, and it is, again, one of the funniest ads I've ever seen. So moving on to music. Many songwriters, believe it or not, have referenced Shakespeare in their lyrics and even song titles. For example, Elton John released a song in 1970 called The King Must Die, about a person falling out of power, which is a very Shakespearean theme. It references two of Shakespeare's plays, Hamlet with the lyrics, Widows Had to Cry, and Julius Caesar, Caesar's Had Your Troubles. Shakespeare himself is even name-dropped in this song, within the first few lyrics. No man's a jester playing Shakespeare round your throne room floor, right after some pretty slow and menacing chords on the piano. So now, we go on to the Olympic opening games ceremony. The 2012 London Olympic Games opening ceremony was created by Danny Boyle. He called the show The Isles of Wonder. He took inspiration from one of Shakespeare's most popular plays. Let's be honest, they're all insanely popular. The Tempest. It was one scene in particular that inspired the creation of the ceremony, The Beautiful Dream of Caliban. The ceremony represented British culture. It was a celebration of the island of Great Britain. The speech itself is delivered by famous actor, director, producer, and screenwriter, Sir Kenneth Branagh. He is very famous for being a Shakespearean actor and well known for his film adaptations of Shakespeare plays, and his films made Shakespeare's stories much more understandable, and he brought them to life for modern audiences, for modern day obviously, which is a really good thing if you ask me. So, the speech that is delivered by Kenneth Branagh in the Olympic Games and is delivered by Caliban in The Tempest is this. Be not afeard, the isle is full of noises, sounds, and sweet airs that give delight and hurt not. Sometime 1,000 twinkling instruments will hum about my ears, and sometime voices that, if I then had waked after long sleep, will make me sleep again. And then in dreaming the clouds methought would open, and show riches ready to drop upon me, that when I waked I would cry to dream again. The ceremony was about Britain's history. It was a celebration of it. It looked at the industrial and digital revolutions and how they changed the world. By choosing to use Shakespeare as part of his inspiration, Danny Boyle was celebrating British culture, in which Shakespeare has played a huge part in. So, to conclude my talk on Shakespeare, Shakespeare remains an icon throughout the world. He forever changed English life, language, and culture as we know it. He gave us classic archetype characters, villains, heroes, and fair maidens, for example. He has fueled our imagination like no other writer before. He gave us the language to express our emotions, hope, despair, sorrow, and rage, and he helped us to understand what it means to be human. He really understood what this meant, really. His characters were very human, being both strong and weak, succeeding and failing. As you can see, his impact on our culture is enormous, and he's very much still alive today. So, I know I technically said that was a conclusion, when actually it's not. In fact, we're going into a top 5 now, and I know I said that was in conclusion, but oh well. So, now for my top 5 favourite Shakespeare facts. So, number 5. An edition of the collected works of William Shakespeare has been produced that includes notes made by Nelson Mandela. Even though English was not his first language, he kept a volume by his bedside for more than 20 years, and it kept him going through his darkest hours on Robben Island. Sometimes he read aloud to his cellmates. He once said that Shakespeare always seems to have something to say to us, which is a pretty good saying if you ask me. So, number 4, the motto of the Globe Theatre, Shakespeare's theatre, of course, was "The whole world is a playhouse." That's it for number 4. So, number 3, admittedly this is my personal favourite, but it's not the best in my opinion. Personal favourite, not the best. Two different things, I think. Anywho, the plot of Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, is actually inspired by Othello, believe it or not, which is a tragedy about a good soldier that is led astray by jealousy and a quest for power, and Anakin's transformation into Darth Vader throughout this movie mirrors the plot of Othello. Imagine that, a Star Wars movie based on Shakespeare. So, number 2. Shakespeare's plays have been translated into over 80 languages, including some into Klingon, the language spoken by the Klingons, who are a fictional alien race in Star Trek, which is one of my favourite movie franchises of all time. So, number 1. When Shakespeare died, he left something very weird for his wife. And that very weird thing was his second best bed. So, now we can conclude this video. Guys, thank you for watching my talk on Shakespeare. I do hope you enjoyed it. I will indeed see you in the next video, whenever it comes, of course. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, follow me on Facebook and Instagram. And I will indeed see you in the next one, guys. Goodbye.